Hi YouTube and welcome or welcome back to the channel. If you don't know, my name is Kain and in today's video I'm going to show you guys the best runes for Vladimir. Now, I recently made a build guide for Vladimir, so if you're interested in that, the link will be in the description down below. But for today's video, we're going to be focusing on the runes, because just like with the builds, I got many requests about people asking what rune should I be going on Vladimir. And to me, it seems quite simple, so let's explain it to all of you. So the basic rune setup, in my opinion, is going to be this setup here, and I will explain it. So we're going to start with Phase Rush. Vladimir is a champion that inherently lacks movement speed. That is why Phase Rush is so amazing on him, right? If you hit people with some abilities or attacks, you will get movement speed, like a burst of movement speed, and slow resistance. So meaning if something like a Karma or something hits you with a Q, like her ult Q that slows you, if you can proc your Phase Rush, her slow will be 75% less effective on you. So Phase Rush is really good to go away from people, right? To walk away from them or to walk onto them, like stay onto them. And even if they have slows, it helps you escape or follow up onto them. So it's a really good tool to just escape from people or stick onto them, which is something that Vladimir tends to struggle with because he does lack a lot of mobility. So therefore, Phase Rush is absolutely ideal, and it is your best scaling rune page. You could argue that your mobility isn't that important in the laning phase, but it is super important in the side laning. So in the 1v1 when you're side laning your opponent in a very long lane, where they can easily run you down or where you can easily run your opponent down. And of course in the late game team fights. So it does scale very, very well. And it is also useful in quite a lot of lanes. Let's say you're playing into an Orianna or something, right? A champion who has slows, who likes to run you down with her QW and auto attacks. This helps you stay away from that and escape from her. Or like a Nessus or like a Kayle, or in top lane when you play versus champions who just in generally, they don't need slows, but they just like to run you down. Like a Nessus likes to run you down and has a slow, right? So it's good into him. It's the same with Phase Rush into a Tryndamere or something. But even into a champion like Renekton, who doesn't have any slows, it's still good to have that Phase Rush, to still walk away from him, or like from a Fiora. So champions who like to run you down, Phase Rush is really good into that, right? So that's why this is going to be your standard rune page in those lanes, and also in general, it just scales the best on Vladimir. And since we're a scaling champion, you can always go this. Now I do get a lot of people asking, yeah, but what if I play into a Yasuo and stuff like that? And we are going to cover that in this video, but keep in mind, even when you play into champions like a Yasuo, who can be very aggressive level 2 onwards, what happens is these champions tend to go Doran's Shield and Second Wind. And then going runes that give you more damage, like this rune that we're going to talk about later, it's not going to be that effective because champions like Yasuo, with their Doran's Shield and their Second Wind, so I'm talking about this rune here in their rune page, they are going to take a lot less damage from you. And then this is not going to help you in the lane. It's going to be like nullified. Their sustain is going to outvalue your extra bit of damage from the runes, making your runes kind of useless. So even in champions that like to be aggressive early on, like a Sylas, or champions that can jump onto you, or maybe champions that you can even bully, if they go Doran's Shield Second Wind, I would still advise you to go Phase Rush and go full scaling. Alright, with that being said, let's fulfill this standard rune page. So I will call it standard here to make sure you guys understand. This is the standard, or like maybe write it like this, most optimal rune page, right? Maybe like that. Alright, so here there's not really anything you can take. You could take Axiom Arcanist. You could take this. I'm not a big fan of it. Why? This is just too broken. Nimbus Cloak, again, we are a champion with lack of movement speed. Nimbus Cloak is going to give you a burst of movement speed after using your flash or your ghost, so after using a summoner spell. So this is extremely useful. Now in some games you are going to run Ignite on Vladimir. For example, when you play top lane, there are a lot of games where you can go Ignite, but even in the mid lane you could run Ignite sometimes. When would you go Ignite? Well, typically in champions that you can really kill early on. And in general, against melee team comps, right? If you play into a full melee team comp in the enemy team, well, you don't really need a lot of mobility into them, right? But then, like, that means you don't need Ghost, right? You could go with Ignite. It makes you stronger in the early game, and you don't need that Ghost for the late game because they're all melee. And that means that you can get away with just Nimbus Cloak here and Face First, so just some mobility in your runes, and now you can go Ignite in your summoner spells and you don't need Ghost. Why is that OP? Well, this is going to give you movement speed after using a summoner spell. This way, your Ignite basically becomes a mini Ghost. So you activate your Ignite on somebody, and now this gives you movement speed to just chase them or walk away from them. So now your Ignite is not only deal damage, but it also has some kind of mini Ghost features in it, right? So that's kind of useful for to know that when you go Ignite, you typically always want to go Nimbus Cloak. But even when you go Ghost Flash, I also always go Nimbus Cloak. It is just the best setup in my opinion right now. All right, and then here, I don't really like to go any of these here. I just like to go Transcendence. In theory, these are like valuable. The problem that I have with Absolute Focus, so this gives you more damage when you are above 70% HP. And the problem that I have with this, Vladimir is quite short ranged. So it's easy for people to kite you and to poke you. And in a fight, you kind of want to play it like a raid boss, like you do your burst combo, but then you get low, you get out, you heal a bit, you go in again. So I don't really like this too much. You could play it. This is mainly when you play like blow up, like one-shot assassin Vladimir playstyle, when you play versus squishies and you go like the Storm Surge Death Cap build. Then you could go something like this. But again, I never go with specific personally. This as well, all the movement speed bonuses are increased on you. For example, think of your Ghost. This is going to increase the value out of it. But again, this in my opinion is so useful on Vlad that I never want to change it for any of these two. And they are, you could pick them on Vladimir, it's just this one is a lot more valuable in my opinion. Why? Vladimir, one of his main weaknesses. People think he is weak in the early game, but he is not. Why is he not that strong though? Like why is he not as strong as like LeBlanc? Like he has good damage, but his ability cooldowns are extremely long. That is why I like to go Transcendence here for the ability haste. Right? It gives you extra ability haste, which is super, super important. All right. And then here, last, I never go water walking. I never go this. This is for champions who like to roam, right? Who like to constantly move up in the river. Vladimir doesn't want to do that, so I never go this. So I always go either Scorch or I go Gathering Storm. And here the main question you have to ask yourself is, like, can I get away with Gathering Storm? Because what does this do? We know that Vladimir is a scaling champion. Gathering Storm is going to scale with you. It's going to say, the longer the game goes on, I'm going to give you extra damage, right? For example, here when the game lasts for 30 minutes, you're going to gain an extra 48 AP, which is quite a lot. Now again, you can't always use this. Like this is very nice, but what if you need a little bit more strength in the early game? Then you could go with Scorch. So what does Scorch do? Well, your next damaging ability, so your Q or your E or right, your next damaging ability, it will burn your target. So you will just get a bit of extra damage on that ability. So this is useful for laning phases where you need a bit of extra damage or where you are just in general into a fistfight lane. Like think of lanes where you are playing into, I don't know, something like maybe like a Riven top lane or something, right? Like you need the early game damage. You can't just scale your way out of it. Like you are in this fistfight heavy lane and you have to use Scorch. So this is like, I need this for my early lane. This is like, my early lane is fine. I can just scale for free. I am chilling, right? That's what this says. But if you can't scale for free, if you need a little bit more help in the lane, go with Scorch. Now again, we're going to talk later about Airy here, right? The damage rune, and typically you're going to combine this with the damage rune. And if you go the scaling Phasers rune, you're typically going to go Gathering Storm and not Scorch. Because it makes sense, right? This is for late game scaling. This is also for late game scaling. So it synergizes really well. But again, if you play versus something like a Renekton or a Fiora, very heavy fistfight lanes in the top lane, then you might say, I need Phase Rush because it helps me escape from them and run away from them so they can't all-in me. But the matchup is so fistfight heavy that I can't just get away with Gathering Storm, so I need Scorch. So that would be a great example of going Phase Rush and Scorch in the same setup. Alright, but this is the general scaling setup. And then in secondary runes, I like to go with Legend Haste. And what does Legend Haste do? I'm not going to explain all these runes, but what does Legend Haste do? It's quite simple. It's going to give you extra ability haste for every stack that you get. So if you get takedowns on champions, so that means a kill or an assist on a champion, or on an epic monster, or on a large monster kill and minion kill, you will get stacks. So for example, even if you hit the grubs, if you get an assist on your jungler taking the grubs, like if you hit all 3 of them, you're going to get 3 stacks. Every stack gives you 1.5 ability haste, so that means you would get 4.5 ability haste just from hitting the grubs with your jungler. Right? So this will give you a max of 10 stacks, so a maximum of 15 extra ability haste through runes. Why do I include this in the standard scaling rune page? Because theoretically you could also go something like this, right? Cashback, so you get 6% gold back when you purchase legendary items. So this is very scaling. The more items you buy, the more gold you saved, right? And then maybe something like this here, scaling with your summoner spells, like you will have your ghost and flash up more often. Like this makes a lot of sense for scaling. But in my opinion, this is so broken. Like 15 extra free ability haste on Vladimir, in combination with Transcendence that will also give you extra ability haste. It is just such an OP combo that I feel like you should always have it in your runes. Unless there is no other way, unless you need something else. But this is for me a very good rune together with this one. So it's my standard rune setup. And then here underneath, what I typically go with is Last Stand. What does this do? This gives you extra damage when your HP is getting low. So most Vladimirs, right, in the lower elos, I feel like their issue is that they try to scale too much and they avoid fighting too much. If you watch my streams or you watch my videos, you will see that I like to play quite aggressive. If you play aggressive, that means that you're probably going to get low. If you're going to get low, having a rune that will increase your damage when you're low will be very, very valuable, right? And then knowing Vladimir, like where you can get low and then surprise people with your red Q healing and having this Last Stand rune at the same time, it just synergizes really well with your champion. So yeah, Last Stand is a very nice rune. Could you go one of those? Sure, if you play into into team comps that are very squishy and you just want to one-shot them, then you could go with this. This will deal more damage when enemies are low, so your ultimate could execute them, for example. If you play into more tankier champions, you could go with Cut Down. But again, I generally speaking just like this one. Because again, it already helps you in the lane. These runes, they're not going to help you that much in the lane. This one is more for like fist fighting in the lane already. And it's still going to be useful in mid and late game, right? So it's my preference. This is the standard rune setup for Vladimir. And then in runes, I always go ability haste, adaptive force. And then based on the laning phase, I will go health scaling, if I plan on full scaling. Or this here, flat health. Alright, just fixed my sound real quick, but I'm back. So, when do you choose which one, right? You go for flat health when you are in a fist fight lane. So when you play versus a Yasuo with Silas, champions that are going to jump on top of you, right? Then you go with flat health. If you are in a free lane where you can scale for free, let's say you play into a Corki, or let's say you play into a Jace. That's even a better example. You play into Jace mid lane or top lane, I don't mind. But you play into a Jace, a very easy matchup. You can dodge this entire combo with your W. So you don't really need the early health. You can just scale for free in that lane. So then you just go with health scaling. So just like Gathering Storm here is, the idea behind this is, if I can get away with it and I don't need to Scorch, I will go with it. Here the reasoning is the same. If I can get away with scaling health, I will go with it. Unless I need flat health because I am in a lane where I am going to get bullied a lot. Right? That's the difference here. Right? And then you will see this will synergize with this, and this will synergize with that. But this is my standard scaling setup, and you could say it is quite greedy. It is a greedy setup in the sense that this is going to make you strong in the late game, but your laning phase you might struggle a little bit more because you're not that strong in the laning phase, because you could have a stronger lane setup. Yet, I do think this is the best setup you could go on Vladimir, and it's the one that I go in the majority of my games, right? And then if I need a little bit more help, I just tweak it to like this, right? So it's either this in like harder lanes or this in free lanes. But that's kind of it. That's the standard most optimal rune page that you need to know. Could you go any other setups? Could you go here into this tree? Could you go into this tree? Could you go into this tree? Yes, but ideally, I just go with this setup and it is the best setup. It just scales for free. And maybe this if you need a little bit more help, right? But that's kind of it. All right. Now, what if you wanted to play like completely for lane phase? Well, if you wanted to play for lane phase, you would go with a more damage keystone. So instead of going phase rush, you would go with airy scorch. What is this going to do? I'm going to read it out loud here because a lot of people don't know what it does. But if you damage enemy champions with your basic attacks or abilities, so both with auto attacks or abilities, you will deal extra damage to them, right? And then empowering or protecting allies with abilities sends area to them, shielding them. So if you have abilities like Oriana E or something, it will also help the shielding for your opponents. But like that's irrelevant on Vladimir, so we only basically go this for the extra damage on our auto attacks or on our abilities when we're hitting an opponent. So this is basically just going to give you a lot of sustained damage, right? Like let's say you're playing to a melee matchup, right? And let's say you play into, I don't know, like a Fizz, right? You play into a Fizz. This is going to give you a lot of damage onto that Fizz because you can constantly auto attack him. And you can constantly use your abilities onto him. Because he's this melee type champion, right? So you can constantly bully him. He doesn't have any ranged abilities. So that means you can always attack him, always use auto attacks, always use abilities. And therefore you can proc this a lot. So it will give you a lot of extra damage in the lane phase and make the laning phase a little bit easier for you. Now again, keep in mind, if you play versus a Yasuo or something like that, or a Yone, who likes to go Dorn Shield Second Wind, this extra damage that you get is going to get completely nullified by their extra sustain. Meaning that this is going to be a waste of your runes. You should probably just go scaling with Phase Rush into those matchups. Right? So not in every melee matchup should you go this, only in the melee matchups that you can just perma attack and get a lot of value out of it. Right? All right, with that being said, so then what would be the difference here? This would stay the same, this would stay the same, but we could change Gathering Storm here for Scorch. Again, this is going to give you a burn effect on your next ability, so your Q, for example, it will have a burn effect to it. So if you combine that with the extra damage of Scorch, that could be a significant extra damage in your early game and early lane phase. But again, playing versus champions that go Doran Shield with Second Wind combo, they are just going to sustain all your damage here. So then it is better to just go with this. Right. Okay. But with that being said, if we go this very lane-oriented setup with Airy and Scorch, I still like to go this because I think it's turbo broken on Vladimir. And this because this is also good for laning phase. But of course, if we're planning on fist fighting early on, we should not go for scaling health. We should go for the flat health, which is a bit stronger in the early levels during the lane phase. So then this is the setup that you would go for when you play lane oriented. Could you make it even more lane oriented? Yes, so I do like this and I think it's broken. But what if you are in a lane that has so much burst damage onto you? Let's say a Silas, right? A Silas, he just likes to E onto you level 1 already and just jump on top of you. Into those champions. This is already nice, but you could improve it by going Resolve and playing even more for the lane. This is going to give you durability, right? So, into champions that like to jump on top of you, like a Silas or a Fizz, you could also go bone plating. What does bone plating do? So after taking damage from an enemy champion, their next 3 spells or attacks that you receive from them will deal less damage, right? So this is not that good against ranged champions because they can just auto attack you once. Now your bone plating will proc. They will wait until it's over, and then they will start poking you. So against champions who can constantly attack you, this is not good. You should go with Second Wind against those champions, right? But against champions who have burst damage like a Fizz, like a Silas, who just want to jump onto you, and Fizz is perhaps the best example of this, because a good Silas, if he sees that you have bone plating, he could do his Q onto you, for example, proc your bone plating, wait until it's over, and then E on top of you. Right? A Fizz doesn't really have any abilities like that. He could try something like Qing onto you and then Eing away or doing the opposite, and just like that trying to bait your bone plating before he does his full all-in combo, but still is going to block his full engage the first time. So it's still really good into those burst type champions like the Fizz, for example. But also into Silas you could go this, for example. And then you would go with Overgrowth. This is just going to give you extra HP when minions or monsters next to you are dying. So when the minions in the lane die, you get some HP for it. Right. So Overgrowth is really good. It makes you tankier, and then bone plating prevents you from burst damage in the lane phase. So this is basically the most lane phase setup you could go. Right. This is the most lane phase setup that you could go. Now, you have to keep this in mind. So with Ares Scourge, we go this into melee matchups typically, or into short-ranged matchups, right? Because we should be able to hit them constantly when we want to go with Summon Aerie. Okay, so then bone plating makes sense, because if you play this into melee champions, that means that melee champions, typically they want to jump on top of you, right? So then bone plating makes sense. But most melee champions, they do not like to poke you. Like, they don't have poke. They don't have ranged abilities that can constantly poke you, right? Again, there are some exceptions to this. Think of Diana mid lane. With her Q, she can constantly poke you with Q, right? But there are, like, most melee champions do not have that mechanic. So then, when you play versus ranged champions in the mid lane, this typically makes no sense. Like, you could say, oh, I'm playing versus Syndra. She can constantly poke me, so I'm gonna go with this. Yes, but if you go second wind, by definition, it mainly means, or it typically means, that this is not going to work. Aerie and Scourge. Now, why is that? Well, again, this is good versus ranged champions, but this is good versus melee champions. So very rarely will you have to go summon Aerie and Scourge with second wind. It doesn't make sense. If you want to have this sustain here into those ranged matchups, this, you can't really attack them, so you should go for scaling in those games. So then you can go something like this. So if you go second wind and Overgrowth, then you should go, in my opinion, Phase Rush and Gathering Storm. If you are playing in melees, now you can go bone plating to shield yourself from their burst and go Aerie Scourge. That's a general guideline here. Right? That's a general guideline. But again, this is full lane oriented. This is kind of what you want to avoid. This is only what you want to go when you're like, okay, if I don't go this, my laning phase, I will just get absolutely demolished. That's the reasoning behind this, because ideally you do go this setup because it's just turbo strong, right? And in lane, you could still also go this if you want to play into melees. This is what I go into melees. But if I play into very difficult melee matchups, I could consider this. If I play in very difficult range matchups, so normally I would go this. If I play in very difficult lane matchups, then I would go with this. Right? And then again, the HP in easy lanes and this in harder lanes. Right? So then typically, if I go this, I'm playing in a hard lane. So then typically I will go with flat health. Right? And then the same here, I will do flat health here with bone plating into those very hard melee matchups. But ideally, I like to go with this setup. Right? That's ideally what I like to go. That is kind of the full runes explained to you. The standard rune setup. Could you go anything else other than the resolve tree? Or in the resolve tree? Yes. Something very niche perhaps. Let's say you play into certain champions that just have a lot of all-in potential onto you. Like, let's say an Akali. Right? Like Akali, it's weird to go bone plating into Akali. Why is that? She's a melee champion, but she can poke you with her range Q. So Akali has an easy time queuing you and then proccing your bone plating, waiting until it's over, and then she can queue you again and all in you. So this is not really good against her. Second wind is also not so good into her because, yes, she does have a range Q, but she's short ranged. And you are also a range champion. So it's not super easy for her to constantly queue you. So it's not like you're getting an insane amount of value out of this either. So then your standard setup into Akali would be this. But again, that might not be enough. So you might want a little bit more help. But this is not enough help anyway. Like, this doesn't really work into the champion. Well, then you could go with this. Now, what does conditioning do? After 12 minutes in the game, you will gain extra armor and magic resist. Now, why is this good? The Akali lane pre-level 6 is typically not that hard, right? The laning phase starts becoming more difficult and the game starts becoming more difficult when Akali has like her first item, right? And that's typically around like 12 minutes, right? At that point, she will already have her item. So basically what's so good about this is Akali likes to all in you. And if you make one mistake, she can just one-tap you from 100 to 0, right? Having a little bit of extra armor and magic resist, make sure that she has a harder time doing that. Specifically when you combine that with this, with overgrowth. Because what is this going to do? Again, I already mentioned it. When minions or monsters die near you, you're going to get some extra HP. So you're going to be a bit more tanky HP-wise and a bit more tanky resistance-wise. So Akali will have a harder time just all-inning you. So where you could go this, but might struggle a bit into Akali, you could consider this, but this doesn't really work into her that well. This doesn't really work into her that well. So then I would go with conditioning and this. So certain matchups, they just need this because this is not useful, this is not useful. Now, a side note into it, if bone plating and second wind isn't useful into those matchups, you could go this, but you could also go this still, because they are very similar now. Why? This only helps you after 12 minutes into the game. So it doesn't really help you that much in laning phase, because the laning phase is typically over around 15 minutes. So you only get 3 minutes value out of this. So if this doesn't really help you in the laning phase, then you might as well have gone with this one, because this one will already help you a bit better in the laning phase, and it's just, this is turbo broken. So back in the day, this is a setup that I used to go into champions like Akali, but now I feel like this is just so broken that if you don't need second wind or bone plating in the lane, I just go with this one. But again, keep in mind, this is an option that you can play around with. It will make you a bit tankier in the mid game. All right, so that is kind of the entire resolve setup. There's maybe one rune that you could talk about, and that is Revitalize. What does Revitalize do? It will give you extra heal and shield power. So basically, let's say Vladimir, you do your Q on a minion, you get 5% extra heal power. Vladimir doesn't have shields, so that is not really relevant onto you. But this is good in a game where you really need all the sustain you can get. So if you are playing into a turbo hard early lane, let's say you play versus a challenger Orianna. Orianna is your hardest mid lane matchup. So if you play versus a very good challenger Orianna, for example, I would say in those games, you could potentially go with Doran Shield, second wind, early health, and then go Revitalize. Because this is going to be good, but it needs some time to give you HP, right? The longer the game goes on, the better this is. So this gives you some late game and mid game scaling, whereas this is already full laning phase. You get some extra heal power in the lane, right? So it can be very useful into those very difficult, like the most difficult matchups in the game, like Orianna, for example. But again, there are not that many good Orianna players out there, so I am never forced to go this. But keep in mind, if you really struggle into a poke matchup like a Syndra or an Orianna or an Anivia, you can go second wind, Revitalize, flat health. That is a setup that you could go. And then even Doran Shield in-game as a starting item. Alright, so that is the last thing I want to say about that. You could go into this tree. I have never experimented with this tree. I don't like it. I think this tree is the best. And then I only don't go this tree if I truly need something from this tree. Right? That's the only thing. Could you go into this tree? Yes, back in the day you could. Why? It's also good for scaling. This gives you magical footwear. What does that mean? You get free boots at 12 minutes, but you cannot buy boots before 12 minutes, right? And then for each kill or assist that you get on somebody, the boots will be 45 seconds sooner that you will acquire them, right? And they give you extra movement speed. So what does this do? It gives you extra movement speed. It gives you free boots, so you don't have to spend your gold on boots, right? You still have to upgrade them fully, but you will get free boots like your boots of speed. Now that means that you have some gold to spend on your power spikes. So if you don't need to spend your gold on boots of speed, now you get to spend that gold onto your death cap or onto your rocket belt or onto your cosmic drive. So it scales very well in the sense that, one, you get more movement speed, so free stats, and that means free gold, and you have more gold to spend on an item power spike, which again means free stats. So this scales really, really well. And then this here is also, so this would be my setup. Cosmic Insight. What is this going to do? It's going to give you item haste. So if you have a Zonias or something, you will get it up more quickly. Or if you have a Rocket Belt, you will have your active up more quickly. And Summoner Spell haste, and that's mainly why I would go this. You would get your Ghost and your Flash up a little bit more frequently. So that's also good because Vladimir is super immobile. So having your Flash and your Ghost, so your mobility tools up more often, is really, really good. So it scales as well a lot towards those mid and late game. Right, so it's also really good. So you could go this. You wouldn't go it together with this. It didn't make sense. This is scaling and this is aggression. Right, so you typically would go it with this full scaling and then here full scaling. Right, but again, this doesn't give you anything in lane. Remember when I said if you need, like if you're in a very difficult lane, you would go something like this, or like this, or maybe like this, like for the mid and late game. Right, but typically I would go with something like this in a very difficult lane. If it's not a very difficult lane, so in like 99% of matchups, I would go this. And even this does give you some help in the early lane phase. You will get some ability haste, which helps you. You will get extra damage when you get low, which helps you in the early lane phase, right? This doesn't deal any damage or doesn't help you in any way in the early lane phase. So this is mainly good when you're planning on scaling for those late game team fights. So when you are in a very easy matchup, let's say you play versus a Jace, you could go something like this. And then here scaling as well. When you're in a very easy matchup, this is what you could do, right? Full scaling. You don't need any damage, just full scaling. But again, I don't prefer going this tree. I just like this so much. I think that I've made that abundantly clear to you guys. All right. Is there anything else you could go into the inspiration tree? Yes. For example, in theory, this looks kind of fine. Cashback. You get gold back when you purchase a legendary item. So this scales very, very well. And then again, I would pair it up with this. Something else you could go. Again, am I recommending this? I'm saying it's an option. I haven't really tried it myself. I think this is the best setup. So everything I mentioned other than this or these setups here, right? Everything else than these two setups I don't think are that good, but you can go them. That's why I'm telling it to you. So this is another setup. This is a setup. And then the cookies are a setup. This will give you maximum health. So that's always good. And it gives you sustain in lane. So if you really want the boots for scaling, you could go with the cookies. If you really want this for your summoner spells, you could go with this. Because this gives you maximum health. So it does help you with scaling a bit. And it just gives you some HP in the laning phase. So you do get something. Right? If you go this, you can say, now I get no help in the laning phase. Or here I get no help. But if I go cookies, at least I get some help in the laning phase. Or if I want to go this, at least I get some help in the laning phase. Can you go any of these other things? I haven't experimented with them. I wouldn't go them. I would either go this, 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 or this. Those are the setups. But again, inspiration tree would be, for me, like, is there a specific rune here that I need? And the one I would consider is this one. Right? This is the one that I would consider wanting. And then I could say, okay, I really want this, and I'm playing in a free lane, so I can go this. Or this, right? Or I really want this, but I'm playing in a lane that's relatively difficult. So I'm going to try and get cookies and try to fight my way out of this laning phase. I get a little bit more sustain now. So maybe now I can get away with going this, right? And then you would go this in this relatively harder lane. So I hope that really makes sense. Now, are there any other setups? No. I don't think there are any other setups. You could go here with something like this, Taste of Blood, and then Ultimate Hunter. But again, I'm not a big fan of this on Vladimir. I haven't really experimented with it, but I'm not a big fan of it because I think these are the better setups. So just keep that in mind. I showed you everything that I know and that I think you should try. All right. With that being said, now we talked about the secondary rune pages, and we mainly stick to either this page here or this. Right. Now we can also switch up the primary rune page. We can also switch this up to one of these keystones, or one of these keystones, or one of these keystones, or one of these keystones. So we're still not done yet. Now, I'm not going to explain all of this. Just like the only one that you could experiment with is, in my opinion, this one. But again, not a fan of it. So I would just skip this entirely for now. In this rune page, there is one that I would consider going, and it's Grasp. the thing is, I would go this in a game where... So the thing is, this gives you scaling, right? It gives you scaling. But this gives you also scaling. And this is typically better scaling. So then, when would you go this? Well, it depends, right? Phase rush is really good if you need the mobility, right? So when the enemies are going to run you down, when you need to run down the enemies, when they are long range, so you struggle getting on top of them, or like you struggle staying on top of them, and then this is good. If you play into a bruiser enemy team comp, so you will not have any trouble like staying on top of them, right? Like, because they're melees. Bruiser champions are typically melee. So then you don't need the mobility from phase rush. You could go with grasp if you are also in a melee matchup in your laning phase where you can proc this constantly. This will give you extra HP, right? So it could be useful. It gives you free scaling. So it gives you some healing in lane, some damage in lane, and some max health. So it is kind of good in laning phase. And also for scaling towards the late game with the max health, especially when you combine it here with overgrowth, right? And then in lane, you could go this for turret plates. And then depending on what you need, if you need some armor, you could go this. If you are in a poke lane, you could go this, but that doesn't make sense because you would go this in a melee matchup where you can auto attack them a lot to get the stack and the proc here for the maximum health on your grasp. In range matchup, you can't, so this doesn't make any sense. If there was a defensive setup that you would go, it would either be this one. But typically I just go with this one, making me strong towards the late game, scaling. I don't want anything for the lane, I want this for scaling for the mid and late game, right? But again, if you are playing in a very difficult lane where you think grasp will help you, you can still go bone plating. But this doesn't make sense, second wind, right? So this is what I would go with. All right, but this is also a possibility, right? Just know that. And then what would you go with here? Probably Transcendence and Nimbus. Why? I think you need Nimbus Cloak in a rune setup on Vladimir. So even though I like this a lot, I don't think it's an option. I think people need this on Vladimir. It's too good to miss out on it. And then this is also really good. So then you go with that, right? And then here's scaling health as well, because this is an HP build. You want to get as much maximum health with this, as much maximum health with this, and with this. So this is an HP build. You want to build a lot of HP, right? Then this is the best setup. But again, you only go this when you're planning on scaling, when you're playing against a very full melee comp in the enemy team, a melee opponent in your lane, things like that. But again, you could even argue into bruiser type champions that you don't need the mobility into per se to get onto them. You might need it to stay away from them because bruiser type champions like Ambessa or Renekton, they do like to run you down and you might need some help getting away from them. So while building HP and being tankier in those matchups or in those games could be useful, it could also be very useful to go phase rush. So my preference would still be to go to phase rush setup in those games and not go to grass setup. But you could go it if you wanted to. That's why I'm showing it to you. All right, are there any other keystones? Here, theoretically, you should be able to go this on Vladimir. And this. But I'm not a big fan of it. Right now, this is just the best page. Right? It's just the best page. Because ideally, this is amazing on Vladimir. This is amazing. This is amazing. And then this is amazing. 4 things in this page are amazing. If I go any other rune page here, like as a primary rune page, whether it's this one, this one, this one, or this one, then I can only pick 2 runes out of the sorcery tree because it's going to be my secondary tree. But I need 4. I just said that this one is amazing, this one, and this one. But if I go secondary sorcery tree, I can only choose 2 runes here that I like this one and this one. But I want all 4, ideally. That's why normally you want to go with the sorcery tree for your main rune tree. Right? So even though this should be possible, I don't like it. Now, I would give you a setup in case you really want to try it. I would probably go with this, some extra healing in lane. Here, for the mementos, probably this one because you can play like an assassin on Vladimir, but I think all 3 would do. But I would go with this one or this one. This could also be good. Extra movement speed. This gives you ultimate CDR. And then here, again, I would go with Nimbus and Transcendence. That would be my setup, right? Same with Electrocute, something like this. If you go Electrocute, you want to be a bit stronger early game, because maybe then you could go something like this. Ignite with Nimbus and Scorch. Flat health, being super strong early game. But again, I do not advise going any of these 2 runes. I just advise going with this setup. Now, sometimes you will have to go with the precision setup. And that is where we choose Conqueror. What does Conqueror do for the people who don't know? Your basic attacks or your ability, so your Q as well, and your E and your W and your ultimate, right? If they deal damage to an opponent, you will grant stacks, right? So keep that in mind. So you will grant 2 stacks of Conqueror, right? That will give you adaptive force, so extra damage, right? It stacks up 12 times. Now, the problem for Vladimir, he's a ranged champion. And what does it say? Ranged champions only gain 1 stack per basic attack. So that means 12 basic attacks will fully stack your Conqueror because it can go up to 12 stacks. So you get per stack, you get extra damage. When it's fully stacked, when you get to 12 stacks, on top of the extra damage per stack that you get, you will also heal for 8% of the damage that you dealt to champions. Right. But again, for range champions, it's only 5%. So it is a bit nerfed for range champions, and it's still fine for Vladimir, but only in games where you really need it. Like, if you play versus like a full range enemy team comp, like they have a Vel'Koz Ashe in the bot lane, and then like a Ziggs in the mid lane, Kindred jungle, Cannon top lane. Like, how are you going to stack your Conqueror? How are you going to get in a team fight so many auto attacks and abilities on top of them to even stack this? You're not even going to be able to stack it. But if you play into melee champions, like, I don't know, like Sylas mid lane, Ambassa top lane, or Yasuo top lane, right? Leona support, Mumu jungle. If you play versus those tankier champions, melee champions that you can constantly hit because they will not instantly die, and they are melee, so short range champions, so you can also constantly hit them, that's when Conqueror will be good, right? Now, the problem is, again, this scales towards team fights, but this is 10 times better. So this is a trade-off. It's like when I'm playing versus tankier champions or melee champions, again, Phase Rush is going to help you. Tanky champions, they have slows, they have CC, bruiser champions want to all-in you, so this is always going to be useful. But if they are so tanky or so melee heavy in the enemy team that you know, oh, I will get a lot of extra damage from my Conqueror this game, like I will be able to stack it very easily because they have lots of short-ranged bruiser or tanky champions like Sion, Cho'Gath, Mumu, Leona, right? That I get so much value from this, then you can go it. What is my like trick or tip to use this? It's very simple. You can always use this. No matter what. This, in my opinion, there need to be 2 conditions met. 1, you need to be in a lane where you can use this. And 2, so in the same game, right? That's condition 1. You need to be in a lane where you can use this. So ideally, you need to use this in a lane where you play versus a melee champion that is tankier. That you can just like not one-tap, like Fizz is melee, but you can one-tap him, right? There's not too much value in Conqueror if you can just one-tap your opponent. This is against champions that you can't one-tap, that you need extra damage during the fight. So when you play versus Yasuo or versus Sylas, you can't just one-tap those champions. So Conqueror could be good into those type of champions, right? So that's condition number 1. But that's not good enough to go. That's only condition 1. Condition number 2, it also needs to be good in the mid and late game. So they need to have... So other than my lane opponent, there also need to be champions in the enemy team, like the top laner or the jungler or the support, that are also very tanky and melee heavy. So 1, the enemy team needs to be in general melee heavy, so melee champions, short range champions that are tanky. And 2, my lane opponent also has to follow that principle. My lane opponent also has to be short ranged and melee. That's when I like to go this. That's when you get a good Conqueror angle. For example, when you play versus Galio, right? A very melee short range champion, right? Again, a side note about the Conqueror though, a side note. It's not because a champion is melee and ranged that therefore, melee I mean and tanky, that therefore you get a lot of value from Conqueror. Some melee champions have insane mobility, and that means it makes it difficult for you to stack your Conqueror on top of them. Or onto them. For example, think of Ambassa or Irelia. Like Ambassa and Irelia, into those lanes, like if it's mid lane or top lane, it doesn't matter. Like they have so many dashes, like it's very difficult for you to stack this. Because they constantly jump around, they move away from you, or they instantly all-in you. And then you can't really stack this. In those games, Phase Rush would again just be better, right? So even if they are melee and or like short range champions that are tanky or bruiser-like, If they have lots of dashes, I still don't like Conqueror because it's just hard to auto-attack and constantly deal damage to champions who are constantly dashing away from you. Alright, now if you were to go to Conqueror page, if you do find that good game, like 1 out of 20 games, if you do find that game, what setup would you go with? Well, I would go, typically it depends on the game, but you could go with a setup like this, for example. Again, this is like a non-negotiable. I like Nimbus, I like Transcendence, so I would always go with this. Could you go something like this? Sure. Could you go this? Theoretically, yes. I hate it though. I need my Nimbus, I need my Transcendence. So, non-negotiable for me, I would go with this. Right. This is also non-negotiable. You go Conqueror not only for the team, but also for your laning phase. When you are playing in a fistfight heavy matchup, like where you're gonna fight, where opponents are gonna jump on top of you and they are melee and bruiser, like Sylas, for example. In those lanes, you're gonna fight early on, so this is going to be good. That means this is also gonna be good. If you fight a lot, when you get low, you get extra damage. That's amazing, because if you fight a lot, you do get low. So this rune also synergizes really well. The only points of discussion could be in these two brackets here. And that's this one, Absorb Life. If you hit minions, if you kill minions, you will heal. Gives you a bit of extra sustain in lane. That's fine. I like this more for outplay potential though. This gives you healing. This gives you like extra damage and healing when it's fully stacked. This gives you extra damage when you get low. So I feel like you already have lots of outplay potential here. Triumph gives you even more. When you get a takedown, so a kill or an assist on somebody, you will restore 5% of your missing health. So you will heal again. Right? And 2.5% of your maximum health, and you will get some extra gold. I don't really care about the gold, but I do care about the outplay potential. If you play versus these bruiser type comps, a lot of the times this will be very useful and give you extra healing to just win the 1v2 or the 1v3. So Triumph could be very useful, so I like this a lot. But again, if you want some extra sustain in lane, which isn't too weird because you are using this in fistfight lanes like a Sylas, for example, then extra sustain is not bad, right? So you could go this. But again, I do prefer the extra outplay potential in the mid and late game a little bit more. But if you play more for lane, you're like, oh, I'm playing this into Sylas and I really need this, or I struggle too much in this matchup. Sure, go with that, right? Just go with that. And then here, again, you could go this one for extra lifesteal or this one for attack speed. Vladimir doesn't need attack speed, so skip this one. But he could use some extra healing. Again, I feel like you already have enough healing, so you don't need this one. And this is just turbo broken on Vladimir. We already talked about it, and especially when you combine it with Transcendence, it's too good to pass on. So just use this one, right? Now, a side note, because now we talked about this, and this is potentially a rune page that you could go into Sylas. What is the difference between this setup and then here the Ares Scourge setup that I talked about? Like this setup that you could, for example, also go into Sylas. So this goes to show, I'm trying to tell you here. So let's say just versus Sylas. I'm trying to tell you here that into multiple champions or into certain champions, you can go multiple rune setups, right? But it depends on the game. So the way I think about it is, for example, if I play versus Sylas, right? Ideally, I would, again, keep in mind, guys, I would always go this setup, right? And if I play into Sylas, maybe this, right? A little bit more aggro early on, but otherwise, if I can get away with it, this. That's my preferred setup. But anyway, if you want to play versus Sylas and you think, oh, I want to be fully aggressive and try to kill him and make sure he can't kill me, okay, a full lane setup would be something like this into Sylas. That would be a full oriented lane phase setup, right? Okay, what is the difference between this and this setup that could also work into Sylas? Well, the difference is this is only focused on the lane. This is turbo good into Sylas, but will be outskilled very heavily in the mid and late game. So in late game, this deals 0 damage. This deals 0 damage. This is not that useful anymore. Only this, and this is useful. This is also not that useful. This would have been a lot better. So from everything you go here, you have like 3 runes that are actually decent towards the mid and late game. Whereas if you go this can be good in mid and late game, right? Now this will be relatively useful, but this will be good, this will be good, this will be good, this will be good. So it scales a little bit better. And also, this is not just good into the Sylas because we picked it in a Sylas lane, but also knowing that his team is tanky, like Leona and Mumu, right? So this is not only good into the Sylas, but into his entire team. This is good into Silas, but it's going to be bad in the rest of his team because it doesn't scale as well. Right. Now, does that mean that this is worse because it's only good in Silas? No, because this here is good in both Silas and his team, is going to be less good into Silas than this setup. This setup is going to be 100% effective into Silas. This is maybe going to be like only 80% effective into Silas, which is still fine. It's still really good, but it's going to be a little bit less effective into him because it scales a bit better, and it's also going to be good into his team. Right. So this is like full, I need to win my lane versus Silas. This is like, I can get away with this and still win. Right. So that is the difference here. So in certain matchups, you can go this setup, and then you can also choose to go the full lane-oriented variant. Again, when do you choose which one? If you are in a very difficult matchup, just go with the full lane variant. Make sure that you survive lane. People think this is an aggressive setup. Oh, I go full lane dominance. Not really. Vladimir is a scaling champion. I would pick these setups not to kill my lane opponent, but more so to make sure I don't die. Like, when I play into Silas, ideally I go this. But let's say if I go this, I die. I don't have enough resistances or damage or threat onto the Silas to keep him away from just jumping onto me all the time. He sees this and he's like, okay, Vladimir has not enough damage in the early game. I can just jump onto him and kill him. Let's say that was true. I don't think it is. I think you can get away with this, and I do so. But let's say that's not the case. Let's say I would say with this setup, I just die. Right. Then I would go this setup, and not to really kill him because this setup deals extra damage, but I wouldn't go it to kill him. I would go it to make sure that he has a harder time fighting me, and if I have more kill threat onto him, that makes my laning phase by definition easier because he won't jump onto me all the time, because now he knows that I could also kill him, and therefore I can farm a little bit easier and scale a little bit easier. So whereas this is also an aggressive setup for lane, I still view it from a scaling perspective, just like this one, right? It's just the difference is, here I need the aggression and maybe like even ignite in lane to scare the Silas of jumping onto me, so I have more time to farm. Whereas here it's like, the Silas is not going to jump on top of me, so I can just get away with this instantly. Or even when he does, I still cannot play him. That is basically all the rune pages and the mindset behind it. So I hope that makes sense. So we have the Conqueror rune page. We talked about these two, but I don't really advise them. We talked about Airy, we talked about Phase Rush, we talked about Grasp, and here there's not really anything you need to go with. So keep that in mind. One last time, my preferred setup is 100% of the time going to be this one. And then in a little bit more difficult matchups, I will go with this one to give me a bit of early game power, but still getting away with the full scaling, right? Then this is making sure that you, like in very difficult lanes, you just need this to have a bit more power and outscale your opponent. Or in very difficult range matchups, you could go with this setup, right? And then in melee, bruiser, tanky team comps, both in lane and in the enemy team in general, you can go with this setup. My preferred one would be Triumph though, but you can go this for lane sustain, right? I hope that makes sense, guys. It's a lot about runes, but now you got to pick my brain. You got to get an idea of what I mean and what runes I go and why I go them. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment, of course, to send me your video suggestions or ideas on this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.